Ebola, COVID. Ferguson, George Floyd. Government bailout, stimulus checks. Two presidents, one black, the other white. If you look at how each of these presidents have responded in moments of crises for America, you start to see an extraordinarily stark contrast in how, one, they respond, and two, how police are deployed. Okay, hello everybody. I'm Dr. Venus, your hot mess millionaire, and today we're going in. We're going all the way in with regard to contrast, and the way we're going to enter it. The way we're doing this today is we're going through the lens of white supremacy. Now, it's interesting to me that just speaking the word black or white or race for people who are not aware of white supremacy occurs to them as racism. Okay? So, as my truth tellers, my job is to educate and arm you so that when you bump into people's cray-cray, you don't have to flex. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to explain. Okay? But the more you are aware of what white supremacy looks like, or white privilege looks like, okay, the less you're triggered by it. Okay? So let's start off with some definitions. Now, I have all of this in the notes, okay? Because knowledge is power, baby. And I want you to give your own revelations. Don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. You don't have to believe me. Read yourself. Get your own revelation. Think for yourself, okay? And thank you for allowing me the gift of providing some context, okay? And I trust you. I trust you to think through the concepts, okay? And not react. There's nothing wrong with your feelings, but I really am very clear that in this particular social political climate, people are looking for a fight. Don't let them manipulate you. Don't let them take your power away by saying things that they know are inflammatory just to get a rise out of you. That's you giving them your power. That's you giving white privilege your power. Don't do it. Okay? So, I want to read you this definition of white privilege. I'm going to read you like 3 of them. But you may want to take a note on it. You don't have to, but that's why I have it written down, and you can read it for yourself. It's really in the notes. If you want to follow along with me, please do so. So, white privilege definition: the set of social and economic advantages that white people have by virtue of their race in a culture culturized by racial inequality. Okay? That's the definition of white privilege. Let's make it more plain. By discussing the reality of white privilege, we're not negating or invalidating other hardships. We're not. I'm not. That's not the conversation. Okay? We're not negating or invalidating other hardships that may come with each individual's circumstances. Absolutely. I know a number of white people who have had it worse than me, which is saying a lot. Okay? So this is not about an individual's personal circumstance. Rather, we intend to shed light on the reality that white people are granted rights, whether they're subtle or obvious, immunities, and opportunities by their skin color, regardless of whether they ask for that privilege or not. This is important to note. So when you are, if you happen to engage with someone who really doesn't comprehend white privilege, you want to take the case. They really don't get it. And you don't have to educate them. You don't have to. It's not your job, but you don't have to dance with it. Okay. And that last quote was from Mehak Anwar, Mehak Okay. Here's another quote that I thought was really great. It's from Shelby Steele. And here in white racism was a shame of truly epic proportions. The shame of white supremacy that for centuries so squeezed the world with violence and oppression that white privilege was made a natural law. So when you hear Trump supporters, when you hear the insurrectionists, the people who did the DC riots, okay, when you hear their rhetoric, Okay. You want to notice how in their speaking, it's their right as a patriot to do what they think they need to do to protect their land, their country, their constitution. It occurs like a natural law, not like a choice or even up for debate or even a democracy. Okay. Now, I want to read you one more and then we'll get into the Obama and Trump comparison. Okay. And this is from Abram X. Kendi. White privileges are the relative advantages racism affords to people identified as white, whether white people recognize them or deny them. This is important to note. They may not recognize them. And if they do recognize them, they'll deny them because the argument is so rooted in that we're right and everybody else is wrong that they can't see anything that doesn't support their claims. Okay? So you want to notice that white privilege, this a series of advantages that they benefit from whether they recognize it or not. To be white is to be afforded one's, check this out, to be white is to be afforded one's individuality, afforded the presumption of innocence, afforded the assumption of intelligence, afforded the empathy when crying or raging, afforded disproportionate amounts of policy-making power, afforded opportunity from a white network, afforded wealth-building homes and resource-rich schools, afforded the ability to vote quickly and easily. These are the privileges of whiteness. And so when we see something like we did on January 6, 2021, when we see white Trump supporters, okay, and I'm not suggesting they weren't infiltrated by other groups. That's not my concern in this conversation. What I'm pointing to are the people who declared that they're Trump supporters who were in the space. So I need to be clear. I want to make sure this is clear. I'm not implying that there weren't some people there starting some shit. You know what I'm saying? They did it with Black Lives Matter. It could be done with Trump supporters. I'm not tripping off that. I think that's the nature of human being. That's not my point. I'm not even tripping off that. That's not what I'm pointing to. The people who showed up at that rally on January 6th to go and take the Capitol declared that they were Trump supporters. Okay? That is what I'm speaking to, right? So you just want to notice in that context of Trump supporters who are going to take the White House, okay, stop the stealing, okay? When they engaged with the police, it was like they were talking to their friend, their cousin, their brother, their uncle, their police, their fireman, their pastor. They took selfies. There was a whole level of relatedness from the Trump supporters, okay, with the police that has to do with a lack of fear, meaning white people who are Trump supporters who were at that particular location at that time weren't afraid of the police. They weren't afraid. They were ushered in. They took pictures. They were understood. They were consoled. They were tended to like human beings, which is in stark contrast to the militarization of the police, the National Guard, different kinds of federal agencies when it came to peaceful protests with Black Lives Matter. Now, let me just say this so I don't have to hear a bunch of crap. I'm clear that Black Lives Matter had police and we burned some shit. Absolutely. I'm clear we did. So I want y'all to be clear. I ain't tripping off that. I don't have it like a bad thing or a good thing. It's fact. It is accurate that we did break some stuff and we burnt some stuff and we looted some stuff. Absolutely. I'm not going to argue that point. That is not this. What I'm pointing to is the way it was handled. There's a difference. If the assumption is that we're violent, then you break out a bunch of armed policemen with helicopters and military gear. If the assumption is these are good people who are frustrated because they feel disenfranchised because they feel like the vote was stolen, and they get a lot of grace and compassion and understanding, you just want to take the case that there is a difference. That's it. That's all I'm pointing to. And that difference is historical. That difference is a wound. And whenever black people see the contrast in terms of how we're treated, even when we're doing whatever we're doing compared to when white people do it, it's the difference between a hip hop concert and a rock concert. If there's a fight that breaks out at a hip hop concert, the police are called in. If a fight breaks out in at a rock concert, the ambulance is called in. That is what I'm pointing to. Okay, so I'm building this whole conversation around white privilege. Okay, and it's due to white privilege that the Trump supporters, the insurrectionists, were able to get to the White House. Black Lives Matters protesters, we didn't get that close. We were blocks away. We couldn't get that close. But the familiarity, okay, this is your son, this is my brother, this could have been my uncle, that right there is white privilege. That is the point that I'm out to communicate. Okay? So when we talk about impeaching President Trump, and I'll get to Obama in a moment, okay? And because there's some things I want to share, because he said something beautiful about Ferguson. He feels like he didn't handle Ferguson well, and I love him as a leader for saying that. So no one is without everyone's human. We do the best we can, all right? But this is the thing that I want to talk to you about impeachment. The challenge with Trump's response is that he actually provoked action knowingly. Do you understand? Deliberately. And to undermine the democracy by continually to promote that the election was rigged and stolen, even after senators and judges and politicians who are Republican declared that they trust the system. He kept pushing it out like that. He did the same thing with when Obama's birthday, with Obama's what do you call it, birth certificate. He even suggested that Obama resign when Ebola made it to America. Okay, so it's not necessarily, and I'm gonna change the language in a moment, so I make sure it lands on. I'm gonna change it from black to white to far left and far right in a moment, because I want y'all to hear the language so you don't get twisted when they say it. Okay. It's not a matter of, how can I say this, God, help me fix it. When I saw the noose hanging on the Capitol grounds, and I saw the different men, white men, is interesting, right? Trashing the White House, right? The thought I had, I want y'all to hear me when I tell you this. The thought I had was, only white men, only white people would do this. Black people, we would not even think to breach that level of power. And I'm saying that because we've been trained not to. You see what I'm saying? It's not because, like, literally, we've been trained to protest, to march. I don't have any historical moment I can point to where black people took the White House. And I will go further to say that it never would occur to us that we could, because we know if we had gotten too close, they would have shot us. We have plenty of support for that, right? So part of the white privilege is the boldness. Like, oh, I can go, I'm not gonna get shot. I can go and express my patriotism, because for a lot of the Trump supporters, they were being patriotic. It didn't matter that they were scaling the wall. They had bombs. They had things to hold people down. None of that counts in that conversation, because what their whiteness doesn't have any other conversation except for the one that tells itself. Okay? So as we move into this whole conversation around impeachment, within the last days of Trump's presidency, the point of the impeachment is not for punishment. The point of impeachment is for protection. Okay? He has access to nuclear bombs. He is trying to pardon himself if he can. He can activate his base again to do so. He can go start some stuff up with some other countries and leave us in a war because he's mad. So the point of impeachment is not like, oh, he's a bad. No. He's a danger. He is a threat And because of the January 6th, we can see how much. He doesn't have a value for democracy. He has a value for domination and agreeance. And he has the right, but we don't need him with the nukes. Okay? So the thing that I want to point to around impeachment, and there's this Article 20, I'm not, you can read, I've given you enough resources to look for yourself. So read them. Don't take my word for it. Please read for yourself. Read, get your own revelation. Okay? The thing that I want to contend with is that his whiteness, not just his supremacy, but his whiteness is rooted in there should not be a consequence for my action. That's white privilege, everybody. Is that I'm right, you misunderstood, you're ill-informed, the media made me do it, I didn't do that, you did that, this is worse. It's all of that is white privilege. Black people can't say that and get away with it. We can't say, oh, the military, oh God, we can't say that, oh, social media made me do it. We can't. We still get dead. We still get shot. We still get put under the jail. That's the difference. White privilege is you can talk back to the police and not die. That's one of the benefits of being white in America. Okay. So when we talk about impeachment, what we're looking at is not so much get him out. No, we want to get him out because he's mad. Right? And we know when he's mad, he does some inflammatory stuff. And we do not want him to be able to run again in 2024 because he is a danger to democracy. I'm not even talking about race. I'm just talking about freedom. Given who he is and what he's demonstrated over the last 4 years, he will trash this country to be right because he just trashed the White House because he did not want Biden to be officiated. He didn't want the official process to go through for him to become the next president. Okay? So that's the part I want to talk to you about impeachment. But now I want to move into, and this is important, Make America Great Again versus Black Lives Matter responses. There's this wonderful article, and I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to read it directly. Okay? I'm going to read it directly. Hold on, let me get here. I'm going to read it directly because I just think they said it beautifully. Just so beautifully. Okay. It says, so it says the police's tepid response to the Capitol breach wasn't an aberration. It wasn't aberrant. It was an aberration. Authorities are more than twice as likely to break up left-wing protests than right-wing protests. So let's move it from black and white to left and right. From black and white to left-wing and right-wing protest. Okay, I'm gonna read this directly to you because they say it better than I ever could. Okay, and the writer is Maggie Korth, and this is from the 538.com. It says, as images from Wednesday's riot by pro-Trump extremists at the U.S. Capitol filled our TV screens and social media feeds, one thing was notably absent: the kind of confrontation between police and protesters that we saw during the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. Even though the Capitol mob was far more violent and seditious than the largely peaceful Black Lives Matter demonstrators, police responded far less aggressively toward them than towards Black Lives Matter protests across the country. Researchers who track this sort of thing for a living say this fits the pattern. Okay. This is so deep, y'all. Check this out. Instead of National Guard troops being posted en masse around landmarks before a protest even began, and I want to make a note that President Trump knew they were coming. So it wasn't a surprise. He just didn't he didn't take the same protocol. Okay. We saw the Defense Department initially deny a request to send in troops, and that was after the Capitol had been breached. So if you look at Black Lives Matter, they got things set up before we got there. But look at the insurrection with the far right. They initially denied a request to send in troops, but then they did after the protesters had already taken the Capitol. Instead of peaceful protesters being doused in tear gas, we saw a mob posing for selfies with police being allowed to wander the corridor of power like they couldn't decide whether they were invading the Capitol or touring it. Instead of President Trump calling these violent supporters thugs, as he called racial justice protesters, and advocating for more violent police crackdowns, we saw him remind his followers they were loved before asking them nicely to go home. Okay? So it's a really wonderful read in that it talks about the data, not about opinions. Okay. So I would encourage you to read it so you have some language in your mouth. So when people say, you're always talking about race, they'll say, fine, I won't talk about race. Let's talk about left wing and right wing protesters. Okay. So that you don't have to get caught up in a fight that's not worth your time. Because fundamentally, how can I say this, God? White people speak in code a lot. If you say race, they hear racism. It's fascinating to watch. And it's like, oh, you're being a racist because you said black. No, I'm telling you what's physically there, right? So it's something that I want you to be aware of so that you don't end up in a conflict over some words that's like, okay, you can't even hear what I'm pointing to. And again, you don't have to explain, but you'll be prepared, okay? But I want to show you the contrast in terms of Make America Great Again and Black Lives Matter responses. Okay, that is the point of it. Now I want to move to Ferguson and versus George Floyd responses. And this is a beautiful, beautiful write-up. This is President Obama did an interview with GQ. And this reporter wrote it up. And it says, Obama has some regrets about Ferguson response. The president spoke to GQ about what he wished he had done differently. Now, you may know this, you may not, but how can I say this? President Obama's response was slow. It was slow. He did not respond quickly. Okay, and he has his logic for it, and I think you should read it because it's important to note. So there were people who died on his watch, black people who died on his watch, which I think that's appropriate in that as a president, you're accountable for what happens on your watch. But here's the thing I want you to hear is that he was willing to be responsible for it. As far as President Trump, he's not responsible for anything on his watch. That is the distinction I want to bring. Okay. And, there's different people speaking to it, calling it out. Stark contrast in police response to Black Lives Matter protesters and domestic terrorists who stormed Capitol. NAACP president says. It's a beautiful write-up. Check up on it. Now I want to move to the Ebola versus COVID-19 response. Girl, they couldn't be more contrast. They couldn't be more black and white. It's not even possible. I'm not going to, that's why I put it here so you can read it for yourself. But the thing I want to bring to your attention is the biggest difference between how President Obama contended with Ebola versus how President Trump contended with COVID-19 is that President Obama believes in science. And instead of making it a political thing, he made it be a health thing. He made it be, let the experts who do this, who tend to health and viruses and pandemics, let them take the lead and let me empower their leadership. With COVID-19, the way that Trump did it, his whole point was it's not that big of a deal. He downplayed it. You know this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But the contrast is, and I want you to hear this. So this is the point of it. If we put it in terms of white privilege context, part of white privilege and white supremacy is this whole notion of rugged individualism, okay, which means we're strong. It's what America was built on. In fact, it's part of our charm, right? We're like strong, we're pioneers, we break things down, we do it, it's very Marble Man-ish, okay? When President Trump started to contend with COVID, he downplayed it, and he says he did. He said he didn't want to scare us, but his lack of leadership did not contain it in the way that Ebola was contained, intended to by experts because their leadership was empowered. So the contrast in terms of I know better versus let me get the experts is white privilege. Do you see that? The fact that he's like, well, I know better than the experts who have spent decades working on this. That, no, it's not a big deal. You know, you can shoot yourself up with some bleach. It'll be fine. That is the cavalierness of whiteness. Okay? That is what whiteness looks like at the level of the presidency, because it's a blow off of life. that doesn't pertain directly to that person. Okay. Whereas with Ebola, President Obama took science seriously and he empowered their leadership because he said, it's not my area. I don't know that. I'm going to defer to people who have spent 20 years learning this so that we don't have to go through that. And there's an article I included here. It says how Trump gutted Obama's pandemic preparedness system. Just read it. It's beautifully written. It's by Vanity Fair. And it points to how white supremacy, white privilege totally gutted out the structures that could have had this save my brother's life. Okay. And so then I also included some stuff around money because y'all know I'm into money. So the economy, how does the Trump economy compare to Obama's? Okay, look back at the 4 key data points. What to remember about Barack Obama's 2009 stimulus package is important. There's a lot of similarities. You'll see, but read it for yourself, okay? And then Trump versus Obama, who created more jobs in the first term? It's important to note the number of the accomplishments that Trump are claiming started on Obama's watch. He may have renewed a bill. He may have renewed a bill, specifically black historic black colleges, but he didn't originate it. And he never says that. So he takes credit because it was on his watch, even though it didn't start there. Okay. But again, read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. I don't need you to, but I do need you to be informed. All right. And so I think the only other thing I want to say before I sign off to my truth tellers is I want to tell you that I love you. Okay. This too shall pass. God is faithful. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm so happy all of this happened right now. I'm not happy that it happened, but I'm loving the timing because now we're about to usher in a new administration. Okay. And this is the thing. I'm betting on Biden. I'm betting on Harris. I'm betting on all of it. Okay. And I know it's up to us as Americans, as citizens, as we need to hold them to account for fulfilling on that which is theirs to fulfill on. I have this, I'm going to say this and then I'll sign off. One of the things that happened in Reconstruction was after President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and emancipation happened, all that kind of stuff, right? The North, instead of going forward with Abraham's agenda, okay, they started to make nice with the South. And they said, you fought the good fight, blah, blah. They said all the things they said, they built the monument. But this is the thing you need to know. Where they stopped in Reconstruction is where we're starting with Biden. That is literally the difference. I need you to know the difference. That had the North followed through on what Abraham Lincoln was doing back when he emancipated slaves, instead of making nice with the South, this would not be where we are. But this is where we are. So this is from Reconstruction to 2021. Our jobs as citizens and as woke folk is to hold them to the fire. I think it's a challenge. I think they're walking into a hellstorm. Okay. And they've made promises. And I'm confident they'll do their best just like every president does. And I'm confident that they're going to make mistakes. And I expect that. What I'm expecting from us is that in 2 years, when it's time to vote the Senate out, we fucking do it. Okay? When it's time for us to campaign, that we do it, that we don't fall back and say, woo, like we did with Obama. Oh, it's over. Had we voted in 2012, he wouldn't have lost the Senate. We now have control of the Senate. We have control of the House, and we have control over the presidency. Okay. The way that this works is whoever has power in these houses set policy that impact your children, that impact your pension, that impact your ability to be a small business owner. So if you don't make it your lifestyle to have your eye on what they're doing and what they're not doing and speaking up the way that you fought and spoke up to get them in that house, then what's predictable is whiteness will settle in. I'm not kidding. Whiteness is insidious. It's a way of being, y'all. It's not a skin. It's a social position. It's not skin. But this is important to note. Otherwise, you'll get lulled into a false sense of security and you'll take your foot off the gas. And I'm saying don't do that. This is when you lean in. Okay. And I think the only other thing I want to say before I sign off is don't be afraid. This is what it looks like when it's working. When systems are falling down, when countries are reimagining themselves, this is what it looks like. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's all over the place. But inside of crises is opportunity. This is where we get to shape the world. We get to shape our world now in a way we could not have done 5 years ago, 100 years ago. So don't lose your power on getting emotional. Don't. They're not worth it. Okay, stay focused. Keep moving forward, and remember that you're God wrapped in flesh. You are the one we've been waiting for. This is your time and your season. So don't get distracted. Don't take your foot off the gas because people are throwing shade. Haters gonna hate. Don't dance. Don't dance. Don't give them the pleasure of your power. Okay. And I think that God, is there anything else you want me to say before we sign off? Let me know your thoughts. I want to hear from you. Um, let me hear from you. What are your takeaways? Right? And how can you use this in your life? How can you have this be useful for you? I'm interested. You post, you don't have to, but I would love to know what's landing because this one is intentionally educational. I'll go back once we get the president in, I'll start going back more to business training. But I want to make sure you get the connection between politics and profits. Okay. If you're not aware of what's happening in the political world, you're not going to be aware of what's happening. You can't really be profitable. And they are connected. Okay. So I've said my piece. I love you, sis. I love you, bro. I love you, fam. Thank you for walking with me. Thank you for being true. And thank you for listening to my word. Thank you for being honest and kind and gentle with me and with each other. And know that you're loved beyond all measure. And remember this, you're worth so much more than you have ever been taught to believe. I love you. This is Dr. Venus, your high Miss Millionaire. Goodbye for now.